We once lived in the wild. Our very survival depended on an awareness of our surroundings, the plants and animals around us. Dutch wildlife photographer Jouko van Der Kruijssen wants to reawaken this awareness by focusing his lens on the diverse wildlife that exists in and around big cities like San Francisco.
Our brains are just filled with nonsense, radio jingles, lyrics to songs you don't like. You can quote all kinds of things that are just lodged in your brain and that just got in there without you trying. And that brain space or that process used to be when we lived in caves, or still is when you go into nature. It's bird songs, it's the shapes of leaves, it's the seasons, it's when things are in a certain spots, it's the plants you can eat and the plants you cannot eat. That's sort of what I'm doing when I'm out here. Recalibrating, I'm using my brain for what it was designed to do, and that really helps me with that process of being in a place and knowing exactly what's going on, so I can then filter out what's interesting and use that for taking good photographs.
Jouko hopes that by capturing the natural beauty of wildlife around us, his photos will increase public interest in protecting these animals and their habitats. It can take hours, days, sometimes years to capture just the right shot of an animal.
So this is how I spend a lot of my time, just sitting in a spot, picking a good frame or angle, and with a lot of animals they use the same little wildlife trails over and over again, so sometimes you can sort of anticipate if something comes, it will come here, and if I have seen a bobcat or a coyote on a certain trajectory in the distance, there's a good chance it might come here or not, but it's still worth it to sit for a while and keep a low profile and just sort of lay low and wait. I don't use binoculars because whatever I can see with my eyes is what this lens can reach. I think if you look at my shots, they're sort of static, almost portrait-like, a lot of them. And that's just because of the way that I sit down and sort of wait for them to pop up and be in an exact spot where I want them to be, rather than follow them or shoot from a car.
Jouko was born and raised in Amsterdam, Holland. He spent his first years living in the annex of the Walloon Church, where his parents worked. From a young age, Jouko was fascinated with wildlife.
Well, I found this out later from my sister, that my mom was very annoyed a couple of nights when I made her read bedtime stories with me, which I just made her read the descriptions of mammals from some mammal book. It wasn't really a story.
He read every biology book he could find at the public library. These are some of the animal portraits Jouko painted during visits to the zoo. 14 years ago, Jouko moved to San Francisco. Coming from Holland, the Bay Area's diverse wildlife was exotic for Jouko. He often returns to the same spots so that he is familiar with the natural rhythms and patterns of an area. The Sutro Baths is one of those spots.
In a national park, it's more spread out, and here in these tiny nature-y patches in the city, it's more concentrated. So I can, look one way and there's a patch of shorebirds, and then look the other way and you've got some herons and some hawks overhead, and then turn around and there might be some whales or dolphins. One time I was here and the hawk was sort of still and hanging still, and these two guys were like, "Oh, look at that drone up there." So that was an opportunity for me to sort of let them know, hey, it's a hawk. So what the cormorants do when they sit like that is they're drying their wings, because they spend a lot of time diving for fish.
A river otter hadn't been sighted in this spot in half a century, but sometimes animals appear when Jouko least expects them.
When I first saw the otter, later named Sutro Sam, I was here just doing what I'm doing now, looking for birds, shooting birds. I was ready to go home, so I was halfway up the hill already, and then I looked down and I saw this thing splashing. First time that he was here, I think I took the best shots of him because he was posing on the concrete in perfect sunset light. We were alone, there was no one else there. I got some really great shots of him that night. One day there was a guy who had bought a trout at the store, at the Safeway, I think, but he had a fresh trout and he was about to put it in the water. And I asked him, what are you doing? He's like, oh, the otter is hungry because there's no fish here. So I showed him some pictures that I had on my camera of the otter eating fish right here. He's like, oh no, there's plenty of fish here. I think he took the fish home and ate it himself, the trout that he bought. Sometimes animals get publications like an otter at Sutro Baths. People know where that is, but as a rule, birders and wildlife photographers too, I think, don't share locations of birds' nests, for example, because they need, that privacy and protection. But I have this picture of a coyote in front of Koi Tower, and it's very hard to not disclose a location when it's in front of a landmark like that. And of course, in a city, there's multiple landmarks, so people can usually figure out where an animal is. Coyotes are really good at hiding. In the wild, where you have sort of the deer trails and the animal trails, they usually sort of follow those. But in the city, they switch back and forth. You can sit around thinking it's going to come around the corner any second because I just saw it walk in that direction and it never shows up. Different times I have been locked on to a coyote on this side of the fence. I looked away and suddenly it was on the other side of the fence. They have ways of getting around that are very agile, and I guess that's also a good adaptation, or at least a skill they have to get around quickly in the city.
When people intentionally or unintentionally act in ways that are harmful to animals, Jouko sometimes films that behavior to raise awareness and help prevent abuse. This man is feeding a coyote during his morning exercise routine. Though it may seem harmless, feeding wild animals can put both animals and people at risk, making the animals dependent on us for food and potentially aggressive. Jouko began photographing wildlife on his lunch breaks in the streets and parks near the financial district office, where he worked during his first years in San Francisco.
That sort of intuition that I acquired by being out in the field a lot, it works everywhere, even in the busiest part of town. If there's a hummingbird somewhere, I'll hear it. If the parrots fly over, it's like a distinct sound. So even with all these sounds going on, there's sirens, there's buses, there's people talking, because I spent so much time in nature and focusing on that kind of stuff, that has allowed me to now pick up and filter out, there's an animal over there, there's an animal over there. I said before that it's very nice to go out still and not get the shot, but when you do get the shot, it makes it even better. As far as what I feel when I come across something like this, apart from just excitement, is total focus. In that moment when I'm just busy with my camera and what's happening there, there's not a thought about, not a worry, not a thought about bills I have to pay or other things. It's just like total extreme focus on what's going on. And that's very pleasant to just come back from that after it happened and just realize that you were completely on autopilot, letting training and instinct take control and just truly being busy with observing what's going on there.